Good morning. I'm Richard Calhoun, real estate broker with Creekside Realty. Here's my contact information. I've been in the business since 1981 locally. We're here to talk about the Silicon Valley real estate market, week number 11. We'll come back to the green URLs a little bit later. So here's the first map of the current market conditions. This is the current market conditions using the data over the past 5 weeks. Single family home, detached, and what we call duet homes. That also includes row homes up in San Francisco, but not townhouses or condominiums. Basically, the concept here with days of unsold inventory is how long would it take to sell the existing inventory at the existing rate of sales. Anything between 42 and a half and 77 and a half days is no color because that's the balanced marketplace. From 7 days to 42 is a shade of red. The lower, the faster the market, the lower the number, the redder the color. And likewise, 77 up to 145, the higher the number, the bluer the color is. So you can see the vast majority of Silicon Valley, which is Santa Clara County, San Mateo County, Alameda County, is red, which I think would surprise a lot of people. The one exception is the expensive areas along the San Mateo, Santa Clara County border. Here's showing DUI over the last several weeks, going back to November 12th of 2022, about 5 months worth of data. And you can see that we went from red, fairly pale red, to basically white right at the end of the year. And then we started to turn around and pick up and we're much deeper red. Basically, what that says is the market was slow, got even slower right at the end of the year, and has turned around now since basically Valentine's Day and even a little bit before Valentine's Day, and started to pick up and is now into what I would call a seller's marketplace as far as the speed of the marketplace. Different benchmarks are going to have different conclusions. Days on market. I am looking at the 75th percentile. This is similar to the average days that a lot of people quote the media. I prefer the median over average for most data points. The problem with the median on days on market is it doesn't change very much because about 50% of the sellers come on the marketplace and sell their home relatively quickly. The median days on market only changes from about 7 to about 12 for a good part of the year, which isn't much of a fluctuation. This is this long typical seller. So the seller that wants to sell, but 75% of the sellers sell faster than they do, 25% take longer. And look at these times on the market. They're basically 2 to 3 weeks for the vast majority of the geographical areas. The slowest areas is the San Mateo County coast at 80. Here, anything between 4 and 45 days is red in shade and color, and from 45 to 115 is a blue shade. And the only blue shade is the San Mateo County coast. The expensive areas in Palo Alto and actually north of Palo Alto, Atherton, Woodside, etc., it's actually getting pretty close to white because it's at 39 days. If it was 45, it would be pure white. So there's a light little shade of pink to it. Moving on to ask price reductions. This is how much the sellers reduce their own asking price before the offer has gotten accepted. But right now, this is 15%. This is the sellers that are taking the 15% of the sellers that take the biggest price reduction. What price reduction do they take? And from 99 to 100%, they basically are red. And the vast majority of these are at 100%, so they're saturated red. You can't really go above 100. Yes, during the real heat of the marketplace, we did go above 100, but that's extremely, extremely rare and requires the listing price to go up after the property's been listed, which is a rare event. And then basically from 99 down to 91 and a half, it gets a darker and darker shade of blue. So you can see one of the slowest areas is also, or one of the longest times on the market, San Mateo County coast, is also one of the ones where the sellers reduce their price the most. And it's not that much. It's basically 6.5%. Their ask price at the time the offer is accepted is 93% of what it was when they first went on the marketplace. You can see most of the areas, 85% of the sellers are taking no price reduction whatsoever. This is the amount of overbidding. So now the reason we introduced the list price stuff was anytime you're dealing with the sale price, you have to wait for escrow to close to get that information. That adds a delay of about 35 days, 5 weeks. So instead of knowing what's happening now, we're finding out what happened 5 weeks ago, which is not as beneficial. But that's the only thing we can do is anything that requires sale price, and overbidding requires sale price. So here you can see the vast majority of the valley is Silicon Valley is basically a pale pink in color, which means the sellers are getting a little bit over their asking price. And if you look at these numbers, they're basically 102, 103%, which is sort of surprising in a marketplace that some people say is slow. Sellers are getting more than their asking price, but that's the average. So when seller getting 150% of their asking price pulls up a lot of listings by 2%. Actually, pull up 25 listings by 2%. That's one of the reasons I don't like average. I will probably change this downstream to a percentile. That way, the outliers don't impact the data. I suspect I'll probably use something like 75 percentile once I got it all processed. Here is the frequency of overbidding. How common is overbidding? Again, anywhere between 33%, a third, and a half of the sellers getting their asking price is white in color. More than half the sellers getting higher than their asking price goes red in color, saturated red at 95, which most areas don't get to. In fact, about 90 is about the highest we got to. It's rare to get over about 75%. Anything below 15% is saturated blue, and it's also pretty rare to get down to 15% just because, some agents price the house low intentionally to get multiple bids. Sometimes a buyer really wants a particular property and will pay more than it's worth knowingly in order to get that property from another potential buyer. But right now you can see the lowest areas, the expensive areas in San Mateo County at 22%. 1/5 of the sellers in San Mateo County in the expensive areas are still getting more than their asking price. And we're looking at the appreciation since 2015, which is actually the appreciation for all transactions from April 1st of 2015 through December 31st of 2015, a 9-month period of time. I picked that 9-month period of time because the market was pretty stable, and therefore you have a pretty solid base for which to measure the future appreciation on. And you can see an awful lot of the markets right around 150%, as it turns out. So some of the areas that saw the highest appreciations are 185%, 176%, 172, 170. 175% sort of on the high range, 150 sort of in the middle, and then the low range is actually pretty much right at about 140%, 143, 140 even, 0.1. The range is pretty compact. There isn't much of a range in the different things. And the 163 should be the median appreciation. Well, it's going to be hard for me to tell looking at it whether it's 163 or 164. I would actually say it's probably 163. So half the areas had a higher appreciation than 163 and half had the appreciation lower than 163. Now we're looking at sale price. And instead of looking at just the median, which is the middle number, I also add in the 10 percentile, the number to the left, and the number to the right is the 90 percentile. For example, if we use South County, the lowest priced home, the lowest 10 percentile is basically 766. The median is 1120, and the most expensive 90 percentile is 1885, basically 1.9 million. What does this tell you? In a nutshell, it tells you that 80% of the homes are selling between $750,000 and $1.9 million in South County, which would be Morgan Hill, Gilroy, San Martin. And you can do that for any area you're interested in. The least expensive areas are blue in color, which are the first several, and at the bottom in the middle of the graph is sort of coincidentally sort of the more expensive areas. So the middle is sort of the more expensive areas, and the top part of the graph and the lower part of the graph expensive areas. It's just the way it worked out. It was not intentional. Here's a recap of what we looked at. So it's taking each one of the market metrics in order, looking at each one of the 17, I believe it is, micro markets, and telling you what the benchmark is. If you're looking for properties, say in the Berryessa area, you know that there's 20 days of unsold inventory. The long seller is taking 17 days, 2.5 weeks to sell their property. They're not taking price reductions. The typical overbid, the average overbid is 2%. The frequency of overbidding is 54%. The appreciation since 2015 is 171%, and the current median price is 1.350. So that gives you a recap of all different areas, and that's basically the same information that's in the map, just here so you can look at a given micromarket area and see all the different benchmarks. Now we're changing gears and we're looking at the overbid. This is how much buyers overbid the seller's asking price at the time the offer comes in. If the market's improving, you get a red up arrow only. If the market's blue only, you have a decreasing market. If they're both here, as in this slide, it's a plateau. We're starting off 12 months ago. We're going forward month to month, and then we're going to jump week to week when we get to 3 months, which is 13 weeks. You'll notice that I have March 22nd there. That's what I call plus 1 week. That's the data that's basically actually last night through midnight, the 17th. I then turn around and replace that data for next week with data through midnight on the 21st, and then I'll be looking at data on the 29th for that Friday. The reason I do that is I have a real estate year that starts on March 1st of every year, goes by multiples of weeks, and then on February 21st jumps forward to March 1st, whether it's 8 days on a regular year or 9 days for a leap year. That way all my data discontinuity is in one spot and it makes sense from year to year to year. So what we're going to do is just step through and look at this 1 month at a time. So 11 months ago, 10 months ago, you're decreasing, 9 months, 8 months. So you can see we're marching down. And now we're going to stabilize. And now we're going down again. And now we've restabilized, and we'll spend a fair amount of time here, about 8 weeks. And now we're going to start improving pretty soon. 1 more week, I think. There we go. Now we've had an improvement for the last 4 weeks. And the last week hasn't improved at all. You can see these 2 lines. The dashed green line is March 22nd, so we haven't gotten there. That's what the +1 week. The brown line is through last night, the 17th at midnight. So you can see the 2 lines are right on top of one another, where last week we went from the purple line to the brown line, and it was quite a jump, and I pointed that out. Now let's talk about the root URLs. Green up here is what I call my root URL. That will take you to the archive of all my past presentations on YouTube. If you add in, after the SV Silicon Valley real estate market graphs, you add in the year 2023, you get to the Zoom meeting that happens at 9 o'clock Saturday morning, and you can participate, you can ask questions, and I would appreciate that. There's a lot of work that goes into this, and I'd like to have a little bit more feedback if people wouldn't mind doing that. If anyone's having problems, in the description, the Zoom links there, the passwords there, so you can do that also, and that's the description on YouTube. If you want the handout, which is not posted this week, I normally try to get it posted about 15 minutes before the hour. It'll get posted when I release this video, which probably will not happen until early Sunday evening, just because of my workload. But you add in H, the year 2023, the month 03/18, and you get the 78-page handout. And it's about 55 pages because for example, the overbidding, I only give you the first slide. I don't give you all the slides. And then if you want any particular episode, you type in the root URL and add in the year, month, date code. With that, does anyone have any questions? Not seeing any unmuted mics, I will proceed. Now what we're doing is, in this series of graphs is all Silicon Valley, and the graphs allow you to look back in time. The maps let you look at things geographically that a lot of people like. This lets you look at things over time. And you can see there's a huge annual cycle with the most number of inventory coming between about June the 1st and about September the 1st, basically the summer months or whatever you want to call it. The peak inventory for Santa Clara County single-family homes tends to be about July 19th, right in the middle of that period. But, you can see it's pretty plateaued. It doesn't change very much. You have 3 lines that repeat. First, you have the blue line, which is the most inventory, 10 percentile. So this is actually 90 percentile, the most inventory you'd expect to have. The black line is the median, the 50 percentile, and the red line is the 10 percentile, the lowest. And when I say the lowest, it's actually about the second lowest year. So you can see in 2021, for example, we had lower inventory. So that's your lowest year. The red here would be your second lowest year. So you can see that we were down. We had lower inventory than the 10 percentile. We quickly got up to the 10 percentile, then we raced up to the 50 percentile. We stayed at the 50 percentile basically, since, June 1st. There was a little dip below all the way down, but now we're not following it up. We've plateaued and we've gone off. So we have lower inventory than you want, and you can see the red is just below, but we're having probably the 3rd fewest number of inventory that we've ever had. And this is the number of offers. Same concept. Now the offers, a lot of offers is good. So a lot of offers is up here, the red line, median, and the fewest number of offers. So you can see we're below this. We're having essentially the lowest number of years because you're below the second lowest number of years. And we're continuing to be below the second lowest number of years. The lowest number of years is up here at about 2,100 transactions. And we're down here at around 1,675 transactions. We're missing quite a few transactions. We're missing about 20% of the transactions. And that's compared to the worst year. If you go up here to the second best year, you'd be at 28%. So we're not quite half, but we're probably 60% or something of our second best year. We clearly have a lack of offers being accepted. Here's your days of unsold inventory. Again, the same concept. Now with days of unsold inventory, the lower the number, the quicker the market, the faster the market, the hotter the market is. Here is the hottest marketplace you want. You really can't see the gray line and black line unless you look really carefully, and you can sort of see it almost centered inside the purple line. And here's your slowest year that you typically have. So we're basically having a typical year based on the speed of the marketplace, how rapidly things are selling. We're just not selling a lot of them. Here is replacing the average days on market, which gets skewed. And average is what a lot of the media reports on, but the average gets skewed when one seller that's been on the market for 1 or 2 or 3 years sells. It brings it way up. But if you look at the percentile, that has no impact, just like it has no impact on the median, because the median is really the 50 percentile. I selected the 75 percentile because it basically mimics the average quite closely, and a lot of statisticians look at quadrants, the 25 percentile, the 50 percentile, and the 75 percentile. Here the 75 percentile looked pretty good, so I stuck with it since that's sort of normal. What are we looking at? You're looking at some of the fastest years down here being somewhere around 14 days to sell 75% of the homes. Typical is about 20 days to sell 75% of the homes. Right now we're up here somewhere around 28 days to sell 75% of the homes. About double the fastest marketplace, but only about 40% more than the typical marketplace. Here's median days on market, just in there for completeness. I don't like it at a very little fluctuation. If you look at the purple line for a lot of these years, it doesn't fluctuate very much. And it does a stair step. There's no graduation like in a percentile or average. Here's the data, which is some of the data I'm trying to resurrect. And I know this data is bad, so I blocked it out. I essentially redacted the bad data. So you're basically down here on the purple line, and then you went up here. You can see where the blue line, the black line, and the red line would be by just going back 1 year. I will probably have this corrected by next week. My other computer is running that right now, but why show you data that I know is bad? But what it's telling you is that the sellers that are taking the biggest percent reduction, this is actually the 97.5 percentile, or the worst 2.5% of the sellers. The sellers that are taking the biggest 2.5% decrease in their asking price is down here at somewhere around 88%. It got as low as 83%, so it's come up 4%. But you can see that even that fringe seller was getting their full ask price at the peak of the market in March and February of 2022. And the advantage of looking at the list price reductions is you get rid of that time lag, and that's why I decided to look into it. You get rid of the time lag of escrows and finding out what the market's doing now versus finding out what the market did 5 weeks ago when you look at sale price. Once I get the right benchmarks and I'm comfortable with them, this is going to be a much better indicator than what's happening with sale price, because it's telling you that how the sellers are performing on the marketplace. Are they reducing their price because they're not getting an offer? Here's the average reduction, which, again, is a more solid and more typical benchmark, but also gets skewed by those 1 or 2 sellers that go way off. A seller getting double their asking price pulls it up. But now what we're talking about is list price to original list price. So those anomalies are not going to be very common. Average actually makes some sense to look at this, at least look at it. But right now you can see that sellers on average are getting 99% of their asking price. You can see in a hot marketplace, they get their 100%. You can see it's very rare to go above 100%. We did in 2022. You can see we were above the best year. That, first 3 months of 2022 was clearly Silicon Valley's best years in a long time, and maybe ever. And so now we're down here getting 99% of their price, and you can see it's below the lowest 10 percentile. So again, sellers right now are taking fairly large, the average seller is taking a very large discount compared to what they normally take, but then they normally only take maybe a quarter percent, 99.75% of their original asking price, and basically no reduction. That's why looking at the average doesn't give you very much. This is the median overbidding. So now we've flipped over to getting closings. So the typical buyer right now is paying a little bit over asking price, maybe about 100.5%, a 0.5% above the seller's asking price. Typical would be up here about 103.5%. The best we ever were was about 109.5%. and that's on the 10 percentile. You can see back in that magical year, 2022, we were way up here at about 117% of the typical seller's asking price, which is just unbelievable. Now we're looking at the average overprice, which goes up to 118.5%. And right now that's at about 103.75%, just shy of 104%. Median is somewhere around 106%. So the market's not doing as well as it typically did. And the typically best, the 90 percentiles at 112%. This is looking at the frequency of overbidding. Look how rapidly overbidding went away. Now it's come back up, but notice this last week was sort of a level, so we may not be going back up. You also have two data points, 14th and the 17th. So it's only 3 days apart. So you'd expect these 2 days to be close together, and it could turn around and go back up and be at the blue line. That's one of the disadvantages of doing it, what I'm doing, but I like to give people the most current data. So the purple data is the most current data, but I'm comparing it to data 4 days in the future. Here's looking at the sold price on log scale. This is just my best eyeball estimates over here because I can't get log scale to print out every in between. I don't know how to do that. When you have the raw data above the blue line, which is just my best guess of, the standard slope through all these data points, which would be your average annual appreciation. So when you're above that, you actually have downward pressure. So we were way above that in 2023 or 2022. So it's not surprising that the market corrected and came back down. We're right now below by quite a bit, and actually for the furthest below we ever been, but it's also at the end of the year. And I counted this up. If you count 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, sort of a 5th year, 6 years, 7 years, and those two are missing. This is the 8th year out of the last 10 where there's been a huge decrease at the end of the year. And even the 2 that were absent, you were totally flat in 2021 going into 2022, and you were close to being flat with a little dip down in 20 going into 2021. So this dip is fairly typical. What I'm talking about is the dip below, the magnitude below the blue line is more than you typically see. It was probably more back here in 2019, but basically by about this time, because this is April 1st right here. So when we get to April 1st here, are we going to get back to the blue line? By April 1st, we were above the blue line. By April 1st, we were at the blue line. I think we're going to still be below the blue line on April 1st. It's going to be close. Time will tell. Now what we're doing is we're looking at the 3 counties that make up Silicon Valley individually. Santa Clara County will be in the deep blue, San Mateo County will be in the orange, and Alameda County is in the gray. And so this is just the active inventory. And if you look at, especially true for Alameda County and Santa Clara County, if you look historically, you can see you have pretty robust inventory. We're down here. We have almost essentially no inventory. San Mateo County is a little bit low, but not nearly as low as Alameda County and Santa Clara County. Now we're looking at the number of offers accepted. Same concept, Alameda County, Santa Clara, much lower numbers than you would typically expect. San Mateo County is clearly down. You'd expect the number to be up here somewhere around 550 transactions, and you're down here somewhere around 275. Basically half the transactions you'd expect to have in San Mateo County. Here's your days of unsold inventory. Now, because we're not only have a lack of inventory, but also have a lack of offers, your days of unsold inventory are basically really in line with what you'd expect for Santa Clara County and Alameda County. It might be a little bit on the high side for San Mateo County, but not dramatically high. Now you're looking at this time to sell the 75th percentile of the sellers. Again, very reasonable across all 3 counties. San Mateo County is being the highest and maybe a little bit higher than typical. Alameda County is probably a tad higher than it typically is. Santa Clara County is probably right where it typically is. You'd have to go back and actually crunch the number, but it's pretty darn close just looking back over time. Yes, the number was lower in 20 and 21, but I would argue, and it was clearly higher in 2020, higher in 2019, lower in 2018, lower in 2017, but higher in 16, 15, and 14. It's basically when you average it all out, it's probably having a typical year, which is sort of of, again, surprising. Meeting days, I really don't like that, and I will probably be dropping this off of the presentation. I'm just doing it right now while I'm, working through all the changes I'm doing. Here's the magnitude of list price reduction. This is where you look at the average sale price. And I don't know if this data point is accurate. It's down dramatically in just the last week, which is sort of surprising. So I'm going to have to go back and double check that data. Alameda County is down a little bit, but clearly reasonable. Santa Clara County turned around and went the opposite direction. So 2 counties are down. Santa Clara County is way up, and Santa Clara County is really pulling away. So right now, Santa Clara County sellers are getting their asking price on average. In San Mateo County, they're only getting 4% reductions. Here's the overbidding. So Alameda County is getting the most overbidding, with the average seller getting 6% above their asking price. San Mateo and Santa Clara County very close together at basically 2% over their asking price. Frequency of overbidding. How common is overbidding? San Mateo County is the lowest at 45%. How bad is the market if 45% of the sellers are still getting more than their asking price? Alameda County is the highest, most common overbidding at 60%. But I think the real takeaway is, look at, here you were in 2022, and you went from some number right around 90 percentile, 85 to 90 percentile, down to a number right around 30, 35 percentile. So basically lost 55% of the sellers that used to be getting overbid were no longer getting overbid. Now we've recovered some of that. We're not going to get back up to this 90% anytime soon. Here's looking at the median sold price for all 3 counties. I added it in the horizontal line so you can come back and see where you're at. This is on log scale, so you can see that, each county has its own unique curve a little bit, and you can see all 3 counties has gone up fairly dramatically in the last couple weeks. Here's the same data, but on analog paper. You can go back and read this numbers, and this is the appreciation for each of the 3 counties. And again, this is off of 2015, April 1st, 2015 through December 31st, 2015. All 3 counties are doing very similarly. They're all right on top of one another, and historically that's true. You can basically see the appreciation in any one of the 3 counties is on typical the same. You can see San Mateo County is lagging behind a little bit most of half of last year, but it's turned around and caught back up. So even though it lagged for 6-9 months, it's catching back up. So here's the actual numbers for the 3 different counties: Santa Clara, San Mateo, and Alameda, and then Silicon Valley. The number of new listings in this past week, you can see, is basically up 4% across Silicon Valley. Santa Clara County had the fewest increase at only 2%. San Mateo had the most at 6.5%, but it's the smallest, so it really doesn't bring it up that much. Then you look at the number of active listings. That's the new listings coming on the marketplace. Active listings, what's available. Alameda County had no change. San Mateo was up 7.5%. Santa Clara County was up 3%. Overall, we were up 2.8%. Offers, basically pretty close to being flat, up 0.1%. Santa Clara County is down 0.3. Alameda County is down 0.4. San Mateo County pulled it off with a 1.4% increase. Days of unsold inventory, my flag on when the market changes is 5 days per week. We're nowhere close to that. San Mateo County saw the biggest increase at 2.2 days, 2.25 days. But remember, a DUI going from 37.9 days to 40.1% per days is a slowdown in the marketplace. It's now taking the seller 2 days longer to sell that inventory. Number of closings, 233 in San Mateo County, 555 in Alameda County, 585 in Santa Clara County, basically unchanged from last month. Then you look at the days on market, the typical 9 days, 11 days, 12 days, really no change. Average days on the market right at 27, 28 days. Sale price to list price ratio 99%. The average overbid is right about 102%, but Alameda County is standing out at 6% above. And Alameda County has really been the high point now for overbidding in both frequency and in magnitude. And then you have the median, and then you have the frequency, basically right at 50 to 60% of the sellers getting more than their asking price. Here's the appreciation for 2015. I also have the appreciation through 2000 from 2020, and you can see their 2020 almost looks like an error here at 132%. It's just the way it works out. The median price now in Silicon Valley is $1,450,000. So you can sell houses in San Mateo County and Santa Clara County that or between 1.4 and their, or even 1.5 and the respective median, that would pull up the median for Silicon Valley and pull down the median for those counties. So in Alameda County, if you're selling a house towards the upper end, anything above 1.5, it's pulling up both counties and both numbers would go up. So what you're having is an increased number probably of properties in San Mateo and Santa Clara counties selling, pulling up the Silicon Valley median, but not impacting the appreciation in each county where there's harder to have a change in the market mix. These two slides go away from Silicon Valley data to Santa Clara County single-family home data only, and that's because I have that data going back to March of 98, I believe it is, and I have 99 on here just because I'm running out of horizontal space. But you can see 566 listings, relatively not uncommon number since 2012. Very low number compared to the years before 2012. If you come down and look at DUI, respectable number for basically the years between 2012 and 2018, a little bit light in the last couple years. Actually, I could say a respectable number all the way from 2012 up to 2020. 2020, we got to start being careful because we're now where we're comparing 3 years ago where you had the pandemic announcement, and obviously days of unsold inventory went way up because inventory, we couldn't sell anything. So this 40 is artificially inflated. But some of the big takeaways is look at the number of offers that were accepted. 744. The only year that was less was the pandemic year, and that's all the way across this entire range. We're having the second fewest number of offers accepted. The only year that's underperforming us is 2020, when at this time of year we weren't even allowed to show properties. We were allowed to sell them, we couldn't show them. So it was very hard to sell properties without showing them. And that lasted from basically the announcement of March 17th through May 1st, if I'm remembering my dates correctly. And then if you come down to number of closings, down here, 604, because closings lag behind, we're still underperforming 2020. That will probably change as we move through the 5-week delay period. You can see the median price now in Santa Clara County is $1,625 compared to $1,905 just a year ago. So we're down from a year ago, but we're up from 2 years ago. Now we're comparing apples and apples, but because we have to go back to February because March isn't over yet. So this is sort of looking in the rearview mirror. Now with February only being 28 days, this is as of March the 8th, so it's still fairly current. But again, it's looking in the rearview mirror. I try to be as leading indicator as I can, but this allows you to compare apples and apples. And we can see we had the fewest number of closings at 318. Compare that to any year back down here. And you can now got rid of the impact of COVID because March 8th was before the announcement. So you had 432 transactions, and that's way outperforming or way underperforming 2020 with 927. We're selling half the homes that we did in 2020 before the pandemic was announced. Here's the real takeaway, in my opinion, is we're only selling 1,684 transactions in Silicon Valley, single-family homes, detached and duets in the past 5 weeks. That's the lowest in the past 10 years. It's only 76% of the previous low. The previous low was 220, and in the last 25 years, the previous low was 2,078 properties. So we're only selling 81% of our previous low over a 25-year period of time. That has to be significant. I don't understand why sellers aren't coming on the marketplace, leading to a fast-paced marketplace with days unsold inventory when there's so few transactions happening. Here's the three takeaways for Silicon Valley. We're looking at the purple being the current inventory. So you can see the black horizontal line here is 100%. That's where you'd expect inventory to be. You're down here, you're somewhere around 70% of the expected inventory. The number of offers being accepted is somewhere around 65% of the offers you'd expect, resulting in a DUI of about 105% of what you'd expect. A higher DUI is a slow marketplace, but when you're close to 100% of your DUI in Silicon Valley, you have a fast-moving marketplace. We've already shown this slide once, but it's a grid summary slide, so I'm showing it for a second time. It basically shows each one of the 17 micro-market areas in Silicon Valley. You can pick out what metric you like the best, and you can see the conditions, or you can go across a micro-market area that you're interested in buying or selling in and see what the conditions are. With that, we're back to questions. We're talking about week number 11 in Silicon Valley. The green is what I call my root URL. The 2023 gets you to the live presentation Saturday morning. H, the year, month, date code gets you the handout, about 55 pages. That's this PowerPoint presentation. Adding a date, year, month, date code to the root URL gets you to a specific episode. With that, are there any questions before we move on to the Greater Bay Area data? Not seeing any questions, I'll proceed. So we've been talking on slides 2 through 62 about Silicon Valley, Santa Clara County, San Mateo County, Alameda County. We're now in slides 65 through 78, going to be talking about the Greater Bay Area, which adds in 10 more counties. The cities being San Francisco and Marin, North Bay being Sonoma, Napa, Solano, and Contra Costa, Central Valley being San Joaquin and Sacramento, and Central Coast being Santa Cruz and Monterey. Here's actually the raw data. Again, each one of the metrics up here, each one of the counties. Starting off with Silicon Valley, I have a total for Silicon Valley. I add in the 9 Bay Area counties and have a total for the 9 Bay Area counties, so you can compare my data with stuff that gets reported in the media. They're never going to agree because we're using different sources. I've also cleaned up multiple entries from different sources to hopefully get one entry, because I was noticing that some properties were getting counted as many as 5 times, and that could skew the data. Then you have the other major issue is I'm using a 5-week moving period where the media uses a calendar month. I think a calendar month is very ineffective because you have different number of days, so it doesn't impact the price, but it impacts the volume of transactions being reported in any given month, depending on how many recording days you have, because sometimes you have 4 weeks plus 5 weekends. Other times you have 4 weekends and 5 weeks, and three up to 3 days may have 5 occurrences, which gives you 3 extra recording days. And then if there's holidays, I use a 5-week moving period. Central Valley got 2 together, no totals, and Central Coast, again, no totals. Here's the data for each of the 5 regions. Again, you can see inventory is down across the board. Here's the number of offers accepted. Same concept. You can see that offers are typically up here somewhere around 2,500, 3,000. We're now down here around 1,800, or 1,700, clearly a drop in volume of offers. Same with the 2 regions down here. This is Santa Cruz and Monterey, and San Francisco and Marin. They're just smaller counties. It's not a faster or slower marketplace. It's just interesting that they're grouped by 2 and 3. Now we're looking at days of unsold inventory in the 5 regions. They're very closely grouped together. Silicon Valley is normally the fastest paced marketplace. It has slowed down. The other areas that have done a noteworthy change are the North Bay and Central Valley, which have sped up. So the 3 are very close together. So Silicon Valley no longer is by itself, but has company with Silicon Valley. The yellow is Central Valley, and the gray is North Bay. Now you have 3 regions out of the 5 that are very similar and are actually having a pretty fast-paced marketplace. You could argue that Santa Cruz, Monterey, and San Francisco Marin are actually having a fast-paced marketplace compared to where they normally are. Yes, it's a little bit slower for those 2 than the 2020, 21, 22 timeframe, but it's faster than any time frame basically from 2000 before 2000. Very noteworthy. Days of unsold inventory, it's the 75th percentile. You can see we're all plummeting down right now, but if you go back and look, you can see the plummet down at the beginning part of every year. One of the reasons why days on market isn't all that important or isn't all that useful at this time of the year. The reason this is happening is the properties coming on the marketplace haven't been on the marketplace for any time, because everybody takes their home off the market for the end of the year holidays. And when I say everybody, it's not everybody, but it's a large percentage of people take their homes off. At the beginning part of the year, you have no inventory, so everything that's selling has very low number of days on marketplace, which is why the drop down. You can see Silicon Valley is typically doing the best. It is still doing the best, but it's not doing as well as it typically does. Then you have the orange, which is San Francisco Marin, and then you have the other three that are very close together, which indicates that they don't have that slowdown as much as the others, but the Santa Cruz is in here, Central Valley is in here, and North Bay is up there. They're very similar. Median days on marketplace, again, very meaningless. I think 75th percentile makes more sense. Here's the largest 10% price reductions, and this might actually be 2.5%, so I'm not going to spend much time on it. That's the reason I think this is fluctuating. I actually believe pretty confidently this is the 2.5 percentile, not the 10%, but I don't know, so we'll just skip it. This is average. I know that's average. You can see it went down. Sellers were only getting 96, 97% of what they were asking on average. That has increased now to 98 to 99%. You can see that for the regions as a whole, they're typically get 99 to 100%. So they're only getting 1% less than they currently typically do. The area that's improved the most is Santa Cruz, Monterey. You can see it's down here, maybe, well, probably between 97 and 99%. And now it's well into the 98%, an improvement for that county. All 5 regions are doing very similarly. They're all in the 99% or 98 percentile range, from 98 to 99%. This is the average overbid. So this is how much the typical buyers overbidding. Central Valley has done a huge spike. I suspect that what happened is a property got by my best efforts, and I see this fairly regularly. I try to clean it up when I see it, where a sale at $535,000 was reported at $535 million, and that pulls up your overbid because it's off by a factor of 1,000. And if you have, only 100 listings, that pulls everything up by 10. That's what I suspect happened on this yellow, because the yellow was way down here, well behaved, and shot way up. So I should be able to find and correct that bad data point. All the other days are about the same. Again, another reason to have more data than anyone possibly wants is that data. When you find a bad data point, it just doesn't really impact your analysis. This is the median overbidding, very close to 100%, so not very useful information. This is the smallest overbid. So now what we're going to do is look at the range of what the buyers pay. The typical lowest overbid is basically from 95% down to 92%. That's an aggressive offer, 92 to 95%. This is the 90%. So this is the most overbidding. And so this is from about 104, about 103%, call it, up to about 117%. Right now in San Francisco Marin, when you look at the buyers that are overbidding the most, they're paying about 17% above the seller's asking price in this marketplace. This is the frequency of overbidding. This is how common the overbidding is. You can see it ranges from a low of about 33%, probably closer to 34%, to a high of about 60%. And you can see that they all sort of do this little flat, the last data point. And again, that's because that something like 31 out of 35 data points are the same. This is total appreciation. You can see that San Francisco Marin has really pulled down, and that pull down happened right with sort of the announcement of shelter in place. You came out and all of a sudden it wasn't so valuable to live in the city or in Marin County, and people were remote working. And the other thing that stands out is Central Valley. It's now at the top. It's sort of interesting that San Francisco Marin has the lowest appreciation and the Central Valley has the most. The other 3 regions are pretty close together. Santa Cruz has jumped up recently for whatever reason. And with that, I'm done with the presentation. Open for any questions. Again, the green root URL gets you to the YouTube. You add in 2023 at 9 o'clock Saturday morning, and you get the live presentation. If you add in H for handout 2023 0318, you get the handout of about 55 pages. You add in the year, month, date code, you get to any specific episode on YouTube. Any questions? Not seeing any unmuted mics. Have a nice week, everybody. See you next week. Oh, by the way, this probably won't get up until Sunday evening. If you want to get it more timely or know when it comes out, I try to get it up Saturday. I know I can't do that this week. Subscribe to the YouTube, and they notify you when I post anything new to the channel. Thanks. Bye for now.